Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025, and today we are going to be taking a look at the 2026 governor elections. At the beginning of every month, we make these predictions. Yesterday, I released my Senate election prediction. If you're interested, you should go ahead and check that out. Skip to the end if you don't actually want to watch the analysis part of the prediction part. But today we're focused on the governor races. There's a lot of them. There are 36 in total across the country, and I always start off a lot of these videos just by talking about how many of these elections are actually far more interesting than you think. Unlike the presidential election that recently passed, many of those states are already decided years in advance. We already know which party is going to win them. We could probably predict 10, 20 years out for many of these races. But on the governor level, there's a lot of fascinating and a lot of interesting races that largely hinge on incumbents and popularity, to which at this point, almost every single governor across this country has a positive approval rating in their state, which makes it very tricky. The interesting thing about this cycle, though, there are a lot of retirements, ranging from states like Kansas up to Maine. Democrats and Republicans alike are leaving their office because they are term limited in their states. And so it will be certainly one where a lot of new names will be brought in, a lot of future presidential contenders will be ushered in. So the governor races often are some of the most important for a variety of different reasons and often end up being the most interesting. So I'm really excited today to get into them and focus on many of them. But like to the presidential election, while there are a lot of competitive races for some of them, they still know their roots as safe states on both sides of the aisle. We'll start off by characterizing the states that are safe, considered to be safe at least for the GOP. There are many of them, and some of them might surprise you. The ones that shouldn't surprise you, though, are states like Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, and South Carolina. Now, many of these races have some very interesting Republican primaries. Senator Marsha Blackburn is now running for governor in the state of Tennessee. In the state of South Carolina, Representative Nancy Mace and Ralph Norman, or I believe that's it. I covered his special election way back when in 2017, but he's running for governor there. A lot of candidates in South Carolina, and practically speaking, across many of these states, they often end up being way more interesting than you think. Oklahoma right now, I wish this was a race we could cover. It sounds fascinating, right? But looking at the last presidential vote share, Donald Trump got 66% of the vote in the state of Oklahoma. So you might be thinking, why in the world am I even talking about this state? Well, if history tells us anything, which it can, Oklahoma has actually had some competitive races in the past few cycles. Really interesting if you ask me. They've had a Democratic governor who's won every single county actually in the 21st century. But again, Oklahoma for now, safe state for the GOP. Would be interesting to see if it ends up being a little bit more solid and locked in. The final state I would characterize, and yes, this is final because I think that Democrats and Republicans stand to be in a more competitive position in many of the remaining states, save the safe blue states. The state of Vermont actually joins the bunch as a safe Republican state. Now, this actually hinges a lot on incumbency. I'm going to assume that Governor Phil Scott is running for re-election. He's immensely popular and actually outpaced and outperformed Kamala Harris and Joe Biden in the past two elections as a Republican in a safe Democratic state. He's very liked. He works well with the legislature. He's a much more liberal Republican in any other state, would never even make it to 5% in a GOP primary. But in Vermont, the only state that actually voted for anybody besides Trump in the 2024 Republican primaries, they voted for Nikki Haley here. Very locked in for Phil Scott. Should he want it, it is his. He would win re-election. They run every 2 years. So a lot of face time and a lot of visibility with his party members and constituents in the state. So Republicans at 10 seats right now out of the 18 they hold out of the 36 in total. The Democrats, too, have their own safe states, and they really shouldn't shock you either. With Kamala Harris saying she's not running for governor in California, this pretty much lends itself to being anybody's race at this point. Katie Porter seems to be the immediate frontrunner, but a very competitive race. Rick Caruso could run. Either way, this race is safe for the Democratic Party. Oregon, there was some speculation that maybe the Republican from 22 might run in 2026. Not confirmed or denied, but even if she does, the Republicans lost this race by 7 to 8 in 2022. Chances are, in a 2026 electorate, Tina Kotek is not nearly as unpopular as Kate Brown was when she faced competitive races, including in 2018. Oregon, for now, is going to be a safe Democratic state. Colorado, another one, not super surprising. Biden won this state by 14. Harris won it by 11. Also, Senator Michael Bennet, who has a strong electoral track record in the state of Colorado, is also running for governor here in 2022. You'll find that if we actually focus on the Senate races there, He won by 14.6% in what was supposedly a strong year for the GOP. So looking at 2026, no doubt in my mind that he wins that governor's race quite easily. And that was also in 22 against a more middle-of-the-road pro-abortion Republican candidate here. Pro-choice, rather, is the better term. Still couldn't even crack 14.6% of the state. Hawaii ends up being a safe Democratic state. Illinois, these are not states that should surprise you. New York, I think Kathy Hochul is really bringing it back to a point where in the right environment, which 26 is looking like it'll shape out to be, her approval rating is rising and her odds at winning are going up. Even against Elise Stefanik, I don't imagine this race is narrower than 10 points. I think Hochul right now stands to be at about a 15, 16-point margin. Could swing, could change. She did win in 22 by 6. It would take a lot to swing the state by 11, but New York has seen some more notable shifts, including between 2020 to 2024. 2026 might be one of those swings. Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, no real signs there. Connecticut might have an interesting primary from a left-wing candidate against the incumbent Dan Malloy in that state. Rhode Island is largely untouched. Democrats are going to win it there. The only state I would say that really is interesting of the bunch so far is the state of Maryland. If former governor, Republican Governor Larry Hogan, we covered his race in 2018 and 2024, it seems like he's all but announced that he's running for governor in the state again. He may narrow it up, but largely speaking, blue state in a blue wave year with a good Democratic candidate, great one at that, he'll probably win. Westmore will probably win re-election by 15, 20, 25 points. Probably not 25 points, probably on the lower end, but still, again, a race worth watching. Might. Heavy on the might be more competitive, but after all, Larry Hogan did lose the last election by 12 points in 2024. I imagine 2026, under a bluer environment, will be better for the National Democratic Party. And so taking a look at these remaining races, we have about 16 that actually stand to be within the bounds of 1 point to 15 points in terms of their margin. Or actually, I guess 0.1% technically speaking, because I do have a tilt state that I'm going to characterize all the way up to about 15 points. We'll start out with the likely states. These are states that we generally know how they're going to go. We could predict pretty much far in advance and say, okay, this party is on track for victory there, barring a major exception, barring a candidate's complete and total collapse in terms of, scandal or a Mark Robinson type of situation in a state like North Carolina where the race started out as competitive and lean for the Democrats, then moved to be likely, then moved to be safe by the end of the cycle. Those things happen, and I think it is only likely states that really end up being the ones that can really do that much whiplash. Of course, we're always excited to be proven wrong in the day and age of elections because American politics is arguably becoming a little bit more predictive than we would have hoped for. But for many of these likely states, we can generally lock in about a year and a half out that these political parties are likely to win these states. And if you're wondering what these states actually look like, there are quite a few. States like Florida and Texas and Kansas come into these as states that are likely for the Republican Party. Whether it's Casey DeSantis or Byron Donalds, Florida is likely to go to the GOP and to be won by anywhere between 5 to 15 points. If Trump won the state by 13, Casey DeSantis or Byron Donalds is probably winning it in 2026 by 11 or 12. Texas has Governor Greg Abbott. He's a popular governor running for re-election. That race will be interesting. Chances are that it is Greg Abbott who wins that race. He won it by 12 and 22, probably wins it by about 11 or 12 and 26. In Kansas, this is actually the first flip of the evening. Kansas goes to the Republicans. Democrats have held this seat since 2019. Laura Kelly ran for this office. Republican Chris Kobach ran against her in 2018, lost. Derek Schmidt ran against her in 22, lost. Now this race is won. The Democrats are going to likely lose, given that the lieutenant governor has opted out of running, and although Laura Kelly has endorsed a Democrat here, state senator in the state, no real guarantee it's that competitive. I think it could be a little bit closer than the presidential. Republicans still have the upper hand. I'd also argue that in Alaska, Tom Begich, I think, can narrow up this race, but until we see more data that is going to be the circumstance for Alaska, I'd say Republicans still maintain a pretty substantive upper hand. Mike Dunleavy, though, looking like he's going to run for Senate in 2028. Certainly an interesting race. Either way, though, Alaska for now, likely for the GOP. The Lieutenant Governor, Nancy Dahlstrom, is running in the state of Alaska. She's quite extreme. She's probably the one that would be the worst for the GOP. Sarah Palin moment type vibe. Maybe more competitive there. But for now, again, starting off with likely for the GOP. I'd also say that Ohio, even though Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, has a lot of vulnerabilities, the last time I made a prediction, there was a lot of speculation that Sherrod Brown would enter into the race. In fact, the signs had indicated that he was likely going to run for governor rather than Senate. 10 days after I made the prediction, he announces he's running for Senate. Okay, deal with that on the Democratic side. The Senate race narrows up slightly. The governor's race moves back a degree. Was a lean red state in my last prediction. Likely red now. Tim Ryan's likely going to run. I could imagine he loses by a 20-22 type margin, 6-7 points. For now, I give it to the GOP, but not outside of the realm of possibility, and I think Ohio before any of these other states, barring a major candidate change in some of these races. New Hampshire also joins the bunch as a likely red state. Point being that in this state, oftentimes the 2-year candidacies often help these incumbents, make them more popular because they're more on it, they're more present. And in this case, Kelly Ayotte, who ran for governor in 24, won against Joyce Beatty by about 9 points. That's actually not the right name. It's Joyce Craig. Joyce Beatty, entirely separate congressional candidate. But getting back to the New Hampshire governor's race, won by 9 in 2024, I imagine wins by a similar amount. Her approval ratings are good. Voters are happy with her. I don't think that it's 2026 that takes her out, at least not right now. And so that pretty much wraps all of our likely Republican states. The Democrats have them too, in many states as well. In states like New Mexico, where former, Biden cabinet official and U.S. representative from New Mexico, Deb Holland, is running in the New Mexico governor's race. She is likely to win. Tim Walz is set to run for re-election in Minnesota. He is also likely to win that race by a likely margin. I don't think there's any doubt there. Even, coming off a presidential, I think going back to your governor's race and running for a third term, he's popular. I think this is very doable and certainly winnable by a margin similar to that of 2022. In the state of Maine, even though there's a retiring incumbent, Janet Mills cannot run for re-election. Democrats are not going to lose this race. The Senate race is the one that's more important, but they actually do have a stacked bench on the governor's side. Some Democrats hope that some of these candidates drop out and run for Senate instead, but even if they don't, point is, the governor's race is pretty locked in and pretty solid for the Democratic Party. Maine, for now, goes to the Democrats, brings their number to 13. Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, popular guy, gonna do well. Stacey Garrity is not the right GOP nominee to meet this moment. I think she loses easily in the Pennsylvania governor's race, and I think Josh Shapiro is gonna make a mockery out of her in that governor's race, brings the Democrats to 14, leaving us down to about 6 races that I think will be at least a lean margin, if not closer. And I know you might be surprised to see one state on here as a toss-up, and that is the state of Iowa. I think Republicans still have the upper hand in this state, that they have held in office for quite some time, but not to mention, too, that, thinking about the GOP in this state, it's not that they have lackluster candidates. It's more that Democrats have a strong one for the first time in a very long time. In 2022, it was a sacrificial lamb type of situation. In the governor's race, it was won by a massive, 30-point or 20-point margin in 2022. But in 2018, when Democrats actually invested heavily into the state, Fred Hubble ran against Kim Reynolds. Democrats only lost this race by 2.7%. And so thinking about what it might be in 26 rather, with, the only elected Democratic statewide official, I think this race could be slightly more competitive, even if Republicans do ultimately have the upper hand. I think Democrats, though, in neighboring Wisconsin hold on to this, even with a retiring Democratic incumbent, Tony Evers. There was some speculation that he would run for a third term. After all, he was eligible, but the lieutenant governor right now is running for this race. It looks like it's going to be a pretty good one for the Democratic Party. Won't be solid and locked in, but the governor's races in Wisconsin have never really been that way. Tony Evers won by 1.1 in 2018, then in 2022, he won by 3.4. And so thinking about, how Democrats would maneuver, right now, Wisconsin stands to be a state the Democrats win by roughly, 3 to 4 points, maybe narrower, maybe more expansive, but I feel most comfortable characterizing it as a lean Democratic state. Looking down at a lot of these other states, though, I do think Republicans stand a really good chance in Georgia right now. With Lucy McBath taking an official exit from the race, Jason Estevez is the one I'm looking at to see if there's, upward mobility there. Keisha Lance Bottoms also entered into the race, so certainly some interesting numbers as well. The point is, though, that right now, the state of Georgia is going to be a very close one. The Republicans still maintain the upper hand. I don't think Democrats have really shined through in the governor's race the way they have in the Senate race. Jon Ossoff is clearly on track to win re-election. The governor's race is a bit trickier. And there's a lot of, questions here about if Democrats lose the governorship in Georgia, does that practically deem Jon Ossoff ineligible to run for higher office in the future? My answer probably in 2028 is probably yes, right? There's a reason why Sherrod Brown wasn't chosen for VP in 2016, and that was due to the fact that the Senate was controlled by the Republicans, and they wanted to win Senate control in that cycle. And so a lot of these conversations are often decided, and this ability, again, this is a lot of high-level reasoning here, but I do think, not high-level reasoning, but jumping through a bunch of hoops to get to the point that I'm trying to make. The point is that I think a lot more hinges on this governor's race than we think, and right now Republicans do maintain an upper hand, but we'll see, because elections can swing back and forth, and Georgia certainly knows that all too well. Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada. Feels like we're going back to a presidential election. The three closest states, I think, that we're set to face this upcoming cycle. Nevada, maybe not, though. I think that Joe Lombardo is quite a popular guy. He could expand it, but Nevada Republicans might be caught sleeping in this race. It is hard to see that this race is any but bigger for the Republicans than a 4 to 5 point margin, and even now I think it's on the lower end for sure. Aaron Ford, who's likely to run in the state of Nevada. Is Aaron Frey also in Maine? I think there might be two Aarons for Attorney General that might be running for higher office. Either way, not the point of the video. The point in Nevada is that Democrats are going to give Republicans Joe Lombardo a run for his money. Ford is a strong candidate. Could be a close race. The circumstances of the year are quite good for the Democratic Party. It might happen because it was Steve Sisolak who took this race from Brian Sandoval, who didn't run for re-election because he couldn't. But in 2014, Republicans won this race by the largest margin of any state in that cycle. 2014, you're going to find, went to the Republicans by 46.7. 4 years later, though, the Democrats won. So it's not impossible and certainly within reach. For these final two states, I think that we have gotten to a point where, I think Katie Hobbs is in a position where she wins this state by a tilt margin. I think that Andy Biggs or Karen Taylor Robson would certainly keep this race competitive, but I don't think they're the right people because I do think both of them have leaned a little bit too much into this Trump style of politics that won't be as popular, won't be as electable in Arizona as it was in 2024. But the very real reality for Democrats is that they are coming off of a state that Donald Trump won by 6 points in the last cycle. So it will be difficult to convince many of these same voters that went from Biden to Hobbs to Trump in 24 to come back to the Democratic Party, especially if Latino voters don't see the massive reversion the Democrats would need to count on in a state like Nevada, Arizona and Nevada in part in order to win. But for now, I still think that Katie Hobbs running against, again, Trump-style candidates who don't have the juice, don't have the, it factor in the state, still narrowly ekes by, but I think is saved by the bell and the circumstances of the national environment. The final state we're characterizing is Michigan, which I think shares a characterization to that of Arizona. And the big reason for that isn't that I think that the Democrats are weak. I think Garland Gilchrist and Jocelyn Benson are strong Democrats. It is that Mike Duggan, the independent former Democratic mayor of Detroit, exceptionally popular, super high name ID within the city limits, is pulling a lot of votes away from the Democratic Party in a way that it makes it difficult for Democrats to see a clear pathway to winning. I think they will still win the governor's race, but I think they will do so narrowly, and thus explains the tilt margin. It's going to be an exceptionally close race, and Democrats will only win this race by relying on the circumstances of the national environment to get them across the finish line. Otherwise, this race in any other year, I think, easily goes to the Republican Party with a Democratic spoiler like Mike Duggan. Now, I don't know if he drops out, and if he does, Democrats will likely skyrocket in terms of, percent chance at victory. But as of now, even with a third party in the race, Michigan, I still think, maintains itself for the Democratic Party, even if done so narrowly. And so on the broad strokes, what the map results in is Republicans having, practically speaking, a net gain of 1. I think Democrats are going to do well in many of these states, but to the degree that I think they're going to win a state like Iowa or Georgia or even Nevada, right now, I'm not seeing it immediately happen. I do think it will be a close race. Across the board, many of these states are going to be more competitive than they should be, especially when compared to the presidential level. And that's what's interesting and fun about many of the governor races. But as it stands right now, Republicans at 19, Democrats at 17, it's a net gain of 1 for the GOP coming from the state of Kansas, which gives Republicans the only flip of this map here. A lot to change between now and November of 2026. I think that the governor races are often more elastic than many of the other races that we've seen on the Senate and House and, of course, on the presidential level. But as it stands today, the Republican Party with the slight upper hand, 19 to the Democratic Party's 17. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.